Hi and welcome to my channel. If you like what you see, please feel free to subscribe to the channel below. If you have any comments or questions, then please feel free to put them in the comments or questions section. Whilst you're on my channel, please have a look at some of my other videos and let me know what you think.
Hi folks, and welcome to my third video log about my experiences learning photography. Today we're going to talk a little bit about light. Now, depending on who you speak to and who you read up on, there are hundreds of different types of light, and there probably are, but for me I've managed to split them down into four main types. So the first type you've got is sunlight. Now it can be whether it's a cloudy day, or which is a little bit more diffused, or a sunny day where you'll get sharper, more shadows and such like. You've got artificial light like what we're stood under here. You also have flash or strobe light, which is either from the flash gun or from your camera's onboard flash. And then you've got moon and starlight. And the way that you deal with each of those, I found it is slightly different, and they'll give you a slightly different effect. So I've taken a series of pictures and I wanted to get a model that would be performing exactly the same every time. And so I chose this guy. Yes, a set of teeth in a resin block, but it is a very textured resin block. It's got, although it's grey in colour, it's got highlights of white, and also you've got shiny teeth in the pink gums, and also like a bronze or brass zip effect. So I wanted to look at the different types of light. So the first pictures that you'll see were done under normal sunlight. These were taken on a backdrop that was standard, because I wanted to make sure that all of the pictures had the same backdrop. That way you've got the same experience with them. And so the backdrop was one that my wife uses when she's making cakes to show the cake off. Now all of the pictures were taken on my trusty Canon 1300D with the 28x80 lens. The f-stop was 4 and the ISO was 100. And the only thing that I changed because of the different lighting environments was the shutter speed. So it ranged from 10 seconds to 1/4 of a second, depending on the actual type of picture that I was taking. Now, the types of lighting that I used, as I've already said, I used normal light or natural light, which we have. To produce artificial light, I used a number of different things. First of all, I don't have a studio set, so what I do is a battery powered work light. Now this is white in colour, but it gives a nice diffused light over a wider area. It's not a directional beam at all. But the next light that I used was what I'll call a tent light, which is a little lantern. It's battery powered. It's more of a blue colour to it, but it gives, again, it's non-directional, so it gives a wider view, a wider light. It's not as diffused as the work light, but it does work just as well. And then finally I wanted to produce a directional light. So for that I used a little head torch here. Now the head torch has got two settings. It's got a dim setting and a bright setting. Doesn't really make much difference. You can still see adequately well with both of them. So for the purposes of this, I actually put it onto the brightest setting, which you see there, and we did all of the work that you'll see in a moment.
So the first image that you see here is taken in the natural light. This was slightly different because the natural light in the bedroom comes from the door, which is directly to the left of the subject, and from the bedroom window, which is to the right of the subject and in front of him. As you can see on the image, the natural lighting gives more of a true colour to the actual image. It is very clear, very crisp, and there's very little in the way of light fall off at the edges, but there is a more natural shadow on this particular day anyway. So the next two images that you see here are using the tent light. Again, it's a 10-second exposure for both of them. The one on the top left obviously is the side lit. And you can see that it creates quite a lot of shadows. It gives a more dramatic image, I think, and it produces a clearer, crisper shadow, but you do get a lot of reflection off the actual grey surface of the model. And because the light was positioned almost level with the subject, but to the side of him, the bottom is very dark. The other image is a little bit overexposed, I think. Probably I could have gone to possibly a 5-second or an 8-second exposure, but I wanted to keep the two the same for the same light source, and you can see that it's quite bright. The actual colour is a little bit lighter than the grey of the actual of Dave, and there's a lot of reflection off the teeth in particular. So these two images are for the work light. Now the work light is slightly bigger. It's about a 10 watt total output, and these were done on a 5 second or 0.5 of a second exposure. The side lighting one, again, there's a lot of shadow, but the pink of the gums and the bronzy colour of the zip is actually quite realistic. It looks like it actually does on the model, but however the grey itself is slightly darker. For the front lit one, you can see the teeth are almost whited out, they're overexposed, the background is overexposed, and the pinks are a little bit too light for my liking. Also, it tends to highlight the whites of the white flecks on the actual model. These two are for the head torch, and you can see that the head torch is a little bit more of a harsh lighting effect, in particular on the side lit version. Again, it was a half-second exposure. You can see that the shadow is quite clear in the background, but the colours of the background have been highlighted somewhat to make them more purple. They are in fact the whitish colour, but you can see that they've been made to look more purple. The pink of the gums and the white of the teeth is actually quite realistic, but the grey again is a little bit too dark. It's more of a moody image. With the front lit head torch on the right there, you can see that it's a little bit overexposed. Again, the colours in the background have been brought out more, and there seems to be some colour variation in the background. The actual grey is quite a realistic grey compared to the actual colour, but it's a little bit overexposed on the teeth and a little bit underexposed where it comes around onto the shadows at the bottom. The base is actually quite well lit, but we would do from the front lighting because it was looking down. The image isn't quite a pleasing one. It's not something I particularly like for this particular subject. These two images were done with two types of flash. The top left hand corner one was the camera flash, so obviously it can only be from the front, and you can see there it is quite harsh. It's quite a white light. It's not the best as far as I'm concerned. It was a 1/30th second exposure. It doesn't look right. It's kind of overexposed in areas and underexposed in some. The flash gun one on the bottom right with the diffuser fitted is a 1/4 second exposure. It's again very dark, but the pink of the teeth is actually quite clear, but the teeth themselves do a lot of reflection for the actual of the actual flash. There's too much shadow. It's very underexposed. This is with the flash gun not diffused. The angle of the flash gun wasn't changed from when it had the diffuser fitted. As you simply remove the diffuser, you can see that it actually brings out the grey within the model, but creates a lot of shadow at the bottom because obviously the flash gun sits higher than the camera. It's not a bad image in some respects because it gives you a sense of depth. It produces a depth of field on this particular one. The particular type of flash gun that I have, you can alter the input the camera settings into the flash gun, and it changes the flash accordingly. And I don't think it's brilliant, but it's not again not a bad image. This one, I just simply changed the direction of the flash gun, so I aimed it straight up at the ceiling. It's a 1/4 second exposure again, and you can see actually this is probably one of the most pleasing images of this subject, if there are any, that I've done. Because of the way that the camera flash is aimed, all of the shadows are at the lower part of it, and there's no real overexposure area. It highlights the teeth by bringing out the shadow from the gums, but also it brings more depth because the back of the mouth is actually darker, and so it makes it more prominent. This one again, I put the camera flash at about 45 degrees so that the camera was bouncing off the corner of the wall and ceiling, and it produced a slightly more diffused light. The grey's a little bit too washed out for me. I don't think it reflects the actual colour of the subject, but the light bouncing in all directions has produced a more subtle image with a better depth of field. It shows the shadows at the bottom much more clearly, but not as clear as they were when it was directed straight at the ceiling. It gives a more rounded shape to the model. It doesn't appear to blend into nothing, and for me, of the two images, this is certainly the more appealing one.
So what have I learned? Well, over the last few weeks when I've been practicing and trying with the camera, different things, different cameras, different flashes, different results, is that you have an image, or you have the capability to affect the way that the image turns out. Light is something that we all take for granted. We can't see without it. It's there. But that's why we are a daytime animal, because we don't have nocturnal vision. But the way in which the light interacts with the surroundings and the way in which the light changes from moment to moment, from scene to scene, also affects the outcome of the image. Now, some of the landscape shots that I've done that you'll see at the end here were done with or without a flash, dependent, and some were taken with my drone. And I've used the lighting, or tried to use the lighting, to make the image more pleasing to the eye, to provide more colour and to provide that. But you'll also see some images where I've altered the colours post-production, so you can see on the pictures that the images were brightened or treated in a way that brings out certain colours of the spectrum. But the last couple of images I wanted to show you were some that I took last night whilst the cloud had cleared, and these were astrophotography. Now, with astrophotography it is slightly different because you need a longer exposure time, and depending on what you're taking a picture of depends on how you set the camera up. So for example, on this image you can see that I've set the camera to take a picture of the moon quite clearly. The settings that you can see below are the ones that I've applied. Now, if you look at how those settings change onto the next image, which is of a starlight, you can see that I've made significant changes in order to capture that light, to make it happen. So I've increased the shutter speed and changed some of the other settings, and that allows you to capture the image. I suppose the advice that I could offer when it comes to practicing with the camera is to get out there and take a picture. You know, everyone talks about shutter count on your camera and all the rest of it, but at the end of the day, how are you going to know what works best for you if you don't try? How are you going to know what works best, what gives you the results that you want if you don't try? So take from this what you will. For me, it's a little bit about learning more of the photography skills of the photographer, and the only way to do that is through trial and error. Right, well, thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it and taken something from it. The next video log will be out in a week or two. Hopefully it'll be as informative for you as it has been for me to learn. Thank you.